Trump just called for Democratic lawmakers to be executed. So, just another normal, chill day. Right, so this week, a group of Democrats who previously served either in the military or intelligence community made a video addressed to troops and others currently serving in those fields. And that including people like Senators Alyssa Slotkin, Mark Kelly, and more. And they said,
this administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
And immediately, you had a lot of Republicans condemning this, right? Trying to claim that these lawmakers were calling for insurrection, saying they're openly trying to undermine our commander-in-chief and secretary of war, as well as insulting service members. But then you had Trump ramping up those attacks today when he wrote, each one of these traitors to our country should be arrested and put on trial. This is really bad and dangerous to our country. Their words cannot be allowed to stand. Seditious behavior from traitors, lock them up. Seditious behavior punishable by death. And then also reposting a bunch of other attacks against those lawmakers, including one that said, hang them, George Washington would. And mind you, this is coming from a president and his supporters who say that it's actually his opponents that are inciting violence. And so among the things you saw, you had people like Governor Gavin Newsom writing, the president of the United States of America just called for the death of Democratic lawmakers, saying this man is sick in the head. And you also had Senator Chris Coons adding, the administration should never try to force our service members to carry out an illegal order. Calling for the execution of senators and Congress members for reminding our troops of that is chilling behavior. Every one of my Republican colleagues needs to swiftly condemn this. And you had Senator Chris Murphy also posting a video calling for people to fight back against this, to not normalize these incitements of violence.
If you are a person of influence in this country, maybe it's time to pick a fucking side. If you are a Republican in Congress, if you are a Republican governor, maybe it's time to draw a line in the sand. This is a very slippery slope that we are on. This is a moment for people to step up.
Right, and then you also had the House Democratic leaders issuing a joint statement regarding the current safety of the lawmakers that were threatened, saying, we've been in contact with the House Sergeant at Arms and the United States Capitol Police to ensure the safety of these members and their families. Donald Trump must immediately delete these unhinged social media posts and recant his violent rhetoric before he gets someone killed. And with that, the Democrats in the video that Trump specifically threatened released a joint statement condemning him, saying, what's most telling is that the president considers it punishable by death for us to restate the law. Our service members should know that we have their backs as they fulfill their oath to the Constitution. Also, I gotta say, quick question to his supporters. Do you find it even a little bit odd that his response to the video was, I'm gonna kill you, instead of saying that he had no intentions of requesting illegal orders? Like, do any flags go up? Also with that, I'll say, unfortunately, if you look at his base, especially in his Truth Social replies, you have many there just agreeing with him and echoing those calls. And as far as responses from Republican leadership, you had Speaker Mike Johnson claiming Trump was simply just defining sedition, but then also pivoting blame back to the Democrats who made the video.
I know the DOJ and the Pentagon are looking into the legality of all that, but what I can address is what everybody knows. That was wildly inappropriate. It is very dangerous. You have leading members of Congress telling troops to disobey orders. I think that's unprecedented in American history.
Right, and then you also had Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying that Trump does not intend to execute members of Congress, and again, slamming those politicians.
And so these members knew what they were doing. They were leading into their credentials as former members of our military, as veterans, as former members of the national security apparatus to signal to people serving under this commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, that you can defy him and you can betray your oath of office. That is a very, very dangerous message, and it perhaps is punishable by law. I'm not a lawyer. I'll leave that to the Department of Justice and the Department of War to decide.
Right, and when asked if the president was inciting violence, she again turned it back around.
Why aren't you talking about what these members of Congress are doing to encourage and incite violence? They're suggesting, Nancy, that the president has given illegal orders, which he has not. Which
then is why you have so many people saying that the whole situation just proves why those Congress members felt that they need to make a PSA reminding the military not to obey illegal orders in the first place. Right, on the issue in the video, you had Alyssa Slotkin actually talking to the New York Times about how service members are actively concerned about this, especially as the legality of strikes carried out by the Trump administration have been widely questioned, saying there's a real issue there of morale and feeling like they don't have a lot of senior leaders who are protecting them. There's a lot of folks in the rank and file who feel very alone. Right, so with that, I think it's important to highlight that this is happening and also make sure that we don't normalize it every day. We shift what normal is. This is not normal. This is scary. It has to be called out. And if people are aware of this, especially the politicians and the commentators, and they're not calling this out, they are part of the problem. I will say the one thing that's helpful about this moment in time is it is really exposing who you and others are, whether that be a good thing or a bad thing. But the next step today, perhaps the truth about these Democrats and their associations with Jeffrey Epstein will soon be revealed because I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files. With that, it's what Donald Trump announced last night in all caps and after months of desperately trying to keep the files hidden. Because the real reason he dragged his feet and fought this tooth and nail is because he was trying to protect the Democrats. That's why he was just looking out for them. And now, after calling Marjorie Taylor Greene a traitor because she had the audacity to be like, we should see the Epstein files, we've been talking about this, Trump is now trying to frame himself as a crusader for transparency. Right, because everyone knows I asked Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune to pass this bill in the House and Senate respectively. Because of this request, the votes were almost unanimous in favor of passage. At my direction, the Department of Justice has already turned over close to 50,000 pages of documents to Congress. Do not forget, the Biden administration did not turn over a single file or page related to Democrat Epstein, nor did they ever even speak about him. And so yesterday, the 30-day countdown officially began, meaning that the White House has until December 19th to release the files, just in time for Christmas. Right, and understandably, there have been a ton of reactions to this news, some of which we covered yesterday, but one, it appears to have caught Trump's attention.
Trump hasn't been this nervous about signing something since Don Jr.'s birth certificate. And the reason he refused to sign an executive order to release the files months ago is because it's a waste of time. And that's the thing about Donald Trump. This is not a man who wastes time on nonsense.
We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this on the grounds of the White House.
This is an executive order relating to the use of paper straws.
Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
But then Trump, who I think I'm jealous of how much TV time he seems to get, at 12:49 a.m. last night was a very irritated president, and he fired off a post on Truth Social saying, "Why does ABC fake news keep Jimmy Kimmel, a man with no talent and very poor television ratings, on the air? Why do the TV syndicates put up with it? Also, totally biased coverage. Get the bum off the air." Right, and that coming after he threatened ABC itself on Tuesday when one of its reporters asked him about Jeffrey Epstein.
I think the license should be taken away from ABC. Because your news is so fake and it's so wrong. And we have a great commissioner, the chairman, who should look at that.
Right, but if, reporters, they couldn't get any straight answers out of Trump, they then tried Attorney General Pam Bondi instead. And when one asked what she'll be doing with the Epstein files over the next month, she replied,
"We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims."
With then someone pointing out that back in July, when the DOJ released the infamous memo that provoked this whole Epstein saga, it declared that an exhaustive review of the files turned up no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Right, so if that is true, you weren't lying then why are they now investigating Democrats like Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, and Larry Summers? Right, the question is, well, what changed between then and now?
There's new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law.
And while that, it may have convinced some, you have others saying they just can't wrap their heads around all the flip-flopping from the second Trump administration. And that includes people who have been Trump diehards like Joe Rogan.
I heard there's no files. I heard it's a hoax. And then all of a sudden, he's going to release the files. Well, I thought there was no files.
Man.
He wants an investigation now.
Listen.
Like, what is going on?
I don't think Trump is in there in a criminal way. But I think he has a lot of powerful friends that have been putting pressure on him to keep that shit under wraps.
I think that definitely has to be
I think it's going to be.
But that said, there is at least one prominent thought leader on the right who's got Trump's back, even up to this point, and that is Ben Shapiro.
There is no evidence that President Trump is engaging in some sort of widespread, deep cover-up of documents that, if just released, will solve all the mysteries, that he's hiding all of this. This whole thing was political. It was always political.
With Shapiro naturally attacking Democrats over this, but he also went after some of his enemies in this ongoing MAGA civil war. Though this time not Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, or Nick Fuentes, but rather a few other big names.
Marjorie Taylor Greene was a joke and remains a joke today. The attempt to turn Marjorie Taylor Greene into some sort of honest, great intellect is like the perfect example of how strange new respect is earned simply by attacking President Trump. And the reason Thomas Massie is attacking Trump on Epstein is not because Thomas Massie is so deep in the weeds on Epstein and cares deeply about, he's right next to Ro Khanna. Come on. It's because Massie doesn't like many of the things that Trump is doing as president. Hundreds of texts over almost a year show MAGA influencer Steve Bannon and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein workshopping legal and media strategies to protect Epstein from the legal and publicity quagmire that enveloped him in the last year of his life.
So his argument is that essentially many of the people on the right that are breaking from Trump on Epstein right right now, they're just cynically using the issue to position themselves as the new leaders of MAGA once Trump's gone. Now, whether that's true or not, that remains to be seen right now. Though in the meantime, if it turns out there is some seriously explosive shit about Trump or his friends or some of his allies in those files, he'll have some egg on his face. But for now, we largely are going to have to wait to see, though we should get some answers, like I said, by December 19th. Though then also, as we talked about in detail yesterday, Trump's got a few different options on how to redact or delay certain parts of the files. But then also the DOJ will have 15 days to submit a summary of any redactions, the categories of documents that were released and withheld, and a full list of all government officials and politically exposed persons who were named or referenced in the documents. And so that technically would give us another deadline of January 5th to look forward to. And then, presuming that lawmakers don't feel satisfied by the White House's explanations, they can try and hold them accountable or take legal action. And in theory, if there's any information that the DOJ temporarily withholds because of an ongoing investigation, then that could come out even later. So basically, this whole Epstein saga, it's hit a big point, but it is also far from over. And then we're gonna get into even more in a minute, but first let me say, debt is like a subscription that you never signed up for. Except I guess it doesn't come with like free shipping, just anxiety. One day you're paying for brunch, the next you're paying for it forever. And that's because the system's designed to keep you hooked. Minimum payments, endless interest, and the occasional special offer, that's just another trap with glitter on it. But enter today's sponsor, PDS Debt, the people helping regular people just finally unsubscribe from financial nonsense. Right? And they've already helped hundreds of thousands of people cut their debt, stop the collection calls, and keep more of their money where it belongs, in their pockets. Credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, whatever's weighing you down, PDS Debt, they build a custom plan based on your real numbers, not a generic formula. There's also no minimum credit score, no empty promises, just real solutions that actually work. And because results matter, they've got an A+ BBB rating and thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. I mean, people trust them because they actually deliver. And so, hey, you could be 30 seconds away from seeing how fast you can dig out for good. Just head to pdsdebt.com/DeFranco right now. That's pdsdebt.com/DeFranco, or even easier, just scan that QR code. But then next up in the news, this is crazy. A former congressional aide was found zip-tied, slashed up, and branded with the phrase Trump whore by 3 men who supposedly targeted her for being MAGA. But except that's not actually what happened. So the woman's Natalie Green. She's a New Jersey woman who formerly worked for Representative Jeff Van Drew. And on July 23rd, a friend of Green's called 911 saying that 3 men had attacked them while they were walking a trail in a New Jersey nature preserve. With his friend telling the operator that the men were going after Green specifically, saying that they knew that she worked for Van Drew and that they were yelling about politics and calling Green names. And when the police arrived, they found Green covered in cuts, her hands and feet zip tied together, and there was writing on her torso saying that Van Drew is racist, as well as the Trump whore message. Right, and when she was found, Green was reportedly crying and screaming through tears that her attackers had a gun and they threatened to shoot her. And then later on, you had Natalie saying to the cops that the men hit her in the head, held her down, used a sharp object to cut her up like that, and wrote the messages that they found on her. Except it turns out none of that is true. Right, because an investigation revealed that 2 days before this so-called attack, Green actually drove to Pennsylvania and paid an artist specializing in scarification to carve the lines into her shoulders, neck, and face. Right, even drawing up exactly what she was looking for. Also, investigators found the same exact zip ties used on Green in her own car, and that was also made worse by a zip ties near me Google search from 2 days before being found on her friend's phone. But really, the first thing that made this whole thing start to smell fishy was the conflicting accounts of the attack itself and the perpetrators being given by Green and her friend when they made it to the hospital. Because it seems like they went through all this work and yet they couldn't get their story straight when talking to the cops. And so now Green, she's been slapped with 1 count of conspiracy to convey false statements and hoaxes and 1 count of making false statements to federal law enforcement, each of which carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. With this being a time where there's so much talk about violence being connected to politics and, accusations going left and right, I say punish her as hard as you can. But also, this is just one of 3 crazy stories involving federal employees, and the next one, it takes place in Minnesota. Right, because a Homeland Security auditor got arrested as one of 16 men caught in a sex trafficking sting. Right, because this guy, Alexander Stephen Back, was caught in a multi-agency sting that was aptly named Operation Creep that was meant to catch suspects allegedly soliciting sex from minors. And specifically, these guys were arrested for trying to solicit sex from someone they believed to be a 17-year-old girl. And the way that the operation worked is that officers would monitor websites and apps that are allegedly used to purchase sex from someone who's been trafficked. Or with the chief of police explaining, if you want to purchase sex from a trafficked person, you would call a number or go on the website. That website would get answered by a person in a different country. That person in a different country would call the handler here and arrange for the meeting with the sex worker. With them then going on to know that these kinds of structures are hard to bust, but in this case, they managed to set up a decoy, and when the men arrived at the hotel to meet who they believed to be a teenage girl, they were arrested. And as for Back, when he got caught, he reportedly tried appealing to the officers by telling him, hey, I work for the government, specifically by saying, I'm ICE, boys, which as it turns out is true. A spokesperson for ICE, said that this guy was hired back in 2022 as an auditor for I-9s, or employment eligibility verification forms, at Aide. Following his arrest, ICE immediately placed Alexander back on administrative leave. And adding, ICE is working with local authorities as well as conducting its own investigation via the agency's Office of Professional Responsibility. Right, and for now, you have back facing at least one formal count of prostitution. He's currently out on bond, and his next court appearance is set to be December 17th. But then finally, for this three-piece, we go further south, and instead of talking about rank-and-file federal employees, we're hitting the lawmakers themselves. Right, because Florida Representative Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick has been indicted on charges accusing her and 3 others of stealing $5 million in disaster funds. Right, so Sheila was first elected to Congress back in 2022 in a special election after the former representative from her district passed away. And a key piece of information to know here is that Sheila's family owns Trinity Healthcare Services, and before joining Congress, she was the CEO. And Trinity Healthcare Services was hired by FEMA back in 2021 to register people for COVID-19 vaccinations, which, is all well and good until last year when the Florida Division of Emergency Management noticed some overpayments. Specifically, they noticed more than $5 million worth of overpayment, apparently the result of a clerical error. But according to law enforcement, rather than returning that money, Sheila just decided to funnel it to her friends and family. And those friends and family then made donations to her campaign for her seat in Congress. And that's in addition to Sheila herself allegedly using some of the money to self-fund the campaign. In the investigation into the whole thing, it actually dates back into the Biden administration and the state of Florida suing Trinity Healthcare Services late last year. And actually, the House Ethics Committee launched an investigation into Sheila in January. But now, this indictment, it brings things to the next level, right? If she is found guilty, she could face up to 53 years in prison. And with that, you had Attorney General Pam Bondi saying, using disaster relief funds for self-enrichment is a particularly selfish, cynical crime. No one is above the law. It's crazy. Sorry. It's crazy to hear Pam Bondi say that. She said it, so I'll read it. No one is above the law, least of all powerful people who rob taxpayers for personal gain. We will follow the facts in this case and deliver justice. But then, as far as a response to all this, you had Sheila maintaining her innocence and calling the charges against her baseless, saying in a statement, the timing alone is curious and clearly meant to distract from far more pressing national issues. From day one, I have cooperated with every lawful request, and I will continue to do so until this matter is resolved. And then, as far as support from her party, you had House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries' spokesperson saying that while she's entitled to her day in court and the presumption of innocence, she will have to step down from her committee assignments while this is ongoing. And that is, there's the possible censure followed by Republican Florida Representative Greg Stube, who said on X, this is one of the most egregious abuses of public trust I have ever seen. And adding, once House Ethics conclude their investigation or she is formally convicted, rest assured I will move to expel her from Congress. But for now, we'll have to see how that, as well as the 2 other situations, play out. And in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions to any of the 3. But then, next up, in a different kind of news, Pornhub is now bending over backwards to try to get everyone spicy content by begging tech companies to have device-based age verification. Right? Meaning that instead of the hub having to verify a user's age to watch adult content, the entire process would be done on the device itself. And all of this, it's coming as multiple US states and the United Kingdom have started requiring age verification in order to view adult content. And the hub's parent company, Aide, they've made it clear that they don't want to be the ones in charge of verifying ages, and its chief legal officer saying, based on our real-world experience with existing age assurance laws, we strongly support the initiative to protect minors online. However, we have found site-based age assurance approaches to be fundamentally flawed and counterproductive. Right? And one of the biggest flaws to having a website handle the age verification is that the data has to be stored somewhere. And unfortunately, as we've learned over the past 2 decades we've been doing the show, it means that it's now far more vulnerable. And so instead, they want someone's computer, iPhone, or whatever to handle the age verification and then confirm it through something called an API. And with that, I'm not going to get into the nerd talk. All you really need to know is that it's a way for computer languages to talk with each other and share information. And a big thing here is it doesn't look like this is a crazy thing to ask. Right? California just passed digital age assurance, and ALO's praised it for getting, quote, it almost exactly right. And that law requires that app stores operators authenticate ages before any downloads. And to tackle that, companies like Google have said that they are committed to protecting kids online, including by developing and deploying new age assurance tools like our Credential Manager API that have been used by websites. And notably, other platforms like Snapchat, Meta, OpenAI, and many others have supported the bill. However, you also had Google trying to downplay ALO's excitement that such a tool was being developed by saying that high-risk services like ALO will always need to invest in specific tools to meet their own legal and responsibility obligations. And that, as Microsoft and Apple, they don't seem just as excited to develop age verification tools. Microsoft's policy is that blanket use of age verification only makes sense for things like adult content, and that it should be done by the service on a case-by-case basis. And then as far as Apple, they similarly dodged the problem by simply stating that it is accounts tailored to age groups that automatically block certain content. Also, I'll say there is a big financial reason for ALO to also push this. Traffic to their sites is plummeted, and highlights highlights one of the company's biggest criticisms, which is that the laws only hurt companies that comply. Right, so for example, they followed Louisiana's law and they saw traffic dip by 80%, but other sites, they just ignored the law and they weren't impacted at all. So arguably, this has been good for another group, and that is that VPNs have surged. Or they're being found that people would rather circumvent the age verification entirely because it's so obtrusive. You know, all of this, it's made a confusing web of rules and laws, but also that could be the point. Right? I mean, for example, you had Wired writing, a lot of these groups pushing for the laws are faith-based organizations, and they've made it clear that in the long run, they don't think that any adult content should be legal. So for many of them, the Hub and other platforms leaving states rather than complying with age verification, it's a feature, not a bug. And so for now, we'll have to see if this California model of app stores or the push for the devices to actually be handling it, if it changes anything. Does it get traction? What does it look like? And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your opinion. But then finally today, as we're winding things down, I got two things for you. The first is an announcement/push that I think you'll like. Part 2 of my early Black Friday Beautiful Bastard sale is now live. And that means that you are getting 60% off pretty much everything we have left. So whether it's something seasonal like Zombie Santa, or it's a bestseller like Emotionally Exhausted, One Day We'll All Be Skeletons, You May Not Fuck with Politics, but Politics Will Fuck with You, and A Silly Ghost in This Economy, it's 60% off. There are literally some shirts you can snag for like $15.20. So get what you want while you can over at beautifulbastard.com. I'll even include some links in the description. But that brings us to our final thing today, because this morning I sat down with the CEO of The Onion, Ben Collins, and we talked about everything, the full conversation. I'm gonna link to it in the description. Definitely watch it. It's a great one. It's a fun one despite all the negativity that we have to talk about. We went over everything from Epstein to the ICE attacks in Chicago, but also the return to the real world and how consumers want real products and to go to real places, and how this revelation gave The Onion its big comeback.
So we brought back the newspaper, which had been dead for 11 years. And now we are the 11th biggest newspaper in the United States in a year.
Crazy.
We brought it back 55,000 people all throughout the world get The Onion now, shipped to their mailbox. And that's how we make our money. Like, people like getting it in their hands. Even if they don't like getting it in their hands, they like the idea of what we're doing. And they get, or they get access to, like, we made a movie about Jeffrey Epstein called Jeffrey Epstein Bad Pedophile. We put it in theaters throughout the country, and people went to that.
Wow.
I'm not being trying to be a neo-reactionary to every technological idea right now, but I am saying there's this real, almost primal sense that we have to be around each other. We have to do stuff in person again, and we're leaning as far into that as we can.
So it is more than a nostalgia play. It's a returning to something else. What is that? Something else you would say?
I don't know. Just being a person. I'm not learning anything on the internet, right? Like everything seems to be, it's like an outrage casino. And I just feel like I get more upset as I'm on there. I don't know. I don't fully believe necessarily that everything that we did in person was better, that everything artisanal is better. I am a product of Hershey's bars and like all mass produced bullshit. I love it. I truly do. And I don't want to sound like one of those like magazine, like zine cranks who was reading alt weeklies from like the 1990s. But I am telling you, if you're a business person, there's a market here. And it's a lot cleaner than like laundering your money through Palantir or whatever. Like we are, it's an easier life to go to sleep to deal in real, actual human beings.
But that, my friend, is the end of, well, at least this video, not the ride, if you don't want it to be. Because you can watch a full podcast and conversation with Ben Collins right here or in the links down below. And or if you missed it, yesterday's Philip DeFranco show is a crazy one. But hey, whatever you do, let me just say thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here on Monday.